Hey guys, this is IX with RolloutReviews, bringing you another BIONICLE review. This time it is set number 70786, Gali, Master of Water. This set contains 87 pieces and retails for about $15 US. Gali actually takes a lot of inspiration from her previous incarnations, but also has a lot of fresh new ideas, one of which being the lighter blue color, which is new to the CCBS system. I think it was first introduced in the Galaxy Squad sets, and it looks fantastic. We'll take a look at her construction, starting from the bottom up. Her legs are fairly simple. They're quite long, but the armor layout is pretty basic. She does have some bright translucent blue bone pieces that we saw previously used on Kopaka, and those look really nice. She also has a couple of little fins sticking out of her ankles, which I can only assume help her swim, but really, that's all that's worth mentioning. Her color scheme features both gunmetal and silver, which works pretty well. She has the Brain Attack version chest piece down below here, just like Pohatu and Kopaka, giving her a slightly more slim waistline. The printing on her chest piece up above is actually pretty coherent. Usually these designs are abstract and all over the place, but for one reason or another, I don't feel that way about this one. It's definitely one of my favorites out of the group. Now, she does have the exposed ball joints on either side of her torso, just due to the nature of how it is constructed, but you'll also notice, just because of the way her gearbox works, she also has a couple of little gears hidden behind it. Towards the back, she has a little bit of extra armor, but this is probably the weakest example. It's pretty gappy, and in all honesty, looks pretty tacked on. I'm not a huge fan of the way this looks, but I suppose it's better than nothing. As for her arms, she does have these large shoulder pauldrons, and while I am a big fan of the design, they do stick up rather high. They are on a couple of ball joints here. You can bring them out, you can swing them around, you can even swing them back like this if you would like, so they can pretty much get out of the way in just about any pose you'd like to put her arms into. Of course, they do feature the new armor piece up top in silver. Aside from that, the construction of her arm is fairly simple, just like her legs. She does, however, feature much more of that light translucent blue, both up top and in the bone piece towards the bottom. She wields this massive battle axe, perhaps harkening back to the aqua axes she wielded in her Nuva incarnation. Whatever the case, it looks awesome. The blades are the same parts used for Liwa's axes, except this time molded in silver. Unfortunately, you do have these bright yellow Technic pieces holding it all together, and you've got pins and axles sticking out all over the place, which might look a little bit unsightly, but those come into play with both her dual weapon functionality and in the combination with the Protector of Water. Towards the bottom, you have this trident piece made up of a couple of blades and this golden spear, and that looks pretty cool as well. I suppose one of my only real complaints with this weapon is the fact that, well, it's huge and a little bit unwieldy. It is possible, however, to get her to hold this with two hands, despite the instructions not telling you how to do this. You can take this off, she can lug it around like this, then from there you can take one of these red axles, plug that in there, and attach this to the bottom of her hand. Personally, I think that this looks a little bit more practical, but to each their own. Gali wears the Mask of Water, providing her elemental abilities. Now, just like Onua's mask, this seems to take equal parts inspiration from both the original Kanohi Cow Cow and the Cow Cow Nuva. I mean, you have the fins up top here, the intake there, hints of both a visor and eyes. You have the triangular mouth shape, the intakes on the sides, all accompanied by a much thinner jawline, which is always great to see on a female character. Now, you also, of course, get a golden version of this mask, and I've said it many times before, this is a great convenience, seeing as in 2002, to get the golden versions of the masks, you had had to search for them in blind boxed mask packs. This makes things that much easier. Her underlying head is the same piece as all of the others, however she does have some bright neon green light piping. Her mask attaches in the same way as well, having a couple of little nubs on the inside of the mask that go into holes on the sides of the head, just like so. By coming to the back and pressing down on the eye stalk, it'll pop off her mask, which in hand is a really fun feature despite its impracticality. Here she is with her standard blue mask, and here she is with her golden mask. At this point, it's no surprise that all of the new Toa have gear functions. If we turn her to the back, we can see this bright yellow gear signifying that is where you activate the gimmick. Interestingly enough, on Gali, all of the larger gears in her gearbox are the bright yellow for some reason. By turning this left and right, it'll of course swing her arm up and down. Unfortunately, this being such a large and unwieldy weapon, it does cause some weight issues from time to time, specifically when you swing it wildly, and specifically in the ball joint in her shoulder. You'll also notice that this armor is attached on the same axis as the gear function, and that can look awkward from time to time. I have seen people reattach the shoulder armor at this ball joint here, and while that is an option, personally I don't like the way it looks. Now, what's interesting is that despite this ball joint not quite being able to hold this axe up when you swing it around, the gear function itself is impressively solid. It's got a lot of extra friction added using those smaller gears we saw behind her chest plate. If I bring this up, you can see she has no problem keeping that large axe up in the air, which, as I said, it's fairly impressive. It's only when you start swinging things around wildly that it gets a little bit out of control. Gali's method of dual weapon functionality involves disassembling her battle axe. First, you're going to remove the blades from one end and give the rest of the weapon to her as a trident here. It does make one end of the weapon look a little bit unfinished, but if nothing else, it makes the gear function work a lot better because this is a lot less heavy. You're going to take the remaining pieces and attach these to the bottom of her feet as swimming flippers so that she can glide through the water much faster. Interestingly, it does tell you to put both of the red axles on one side, and intentional or not, you are able to peg her legs together, giving her kind of a mermaid tail. And honestly, I can't tell if I like this or not. Of course, this set also includes a skull spider, the silver variant, just like the one that came with Kopaka. You have the 4 legs that can move, and if we turn it to the back, we can see it acts like a mask. If Gali were to get her mask knocked off of her face, we can then replace it with a skull spider, and she's now under its control. Of course, we can pop that off as well, unless, of course, we were to take the back legs and wrap them around the trigger, making things much more difficult for the Toa of Water. As I understand, it's more widely accepted that this Gali actually looks feminine. However, very similar to the original Gali, she's not built a whole lot differently from many of the other Toa. So I'm going to take this opportunity trying to explain exactly why that is. First of all, I mentioned earlier that she has a much thinner jawline. That definitely helps, but it doesn't end there. Her torso is built pretty much the same way as Pohatu's. The key difference here, however, is that her legs are much longer. On top of that, the armor on her thighs has a bit more of a round shape. Paired with her thinner waist, it maybe gives off the impression that her hips are a bit wider. Similarly, her armor on her shoulders is actually very minimal, despite these pauldrons up here. On her upper arms, she only has these little shells. This sort of makes her shoulders maybe look a little bit less broad. Finally, This armor up here does sit pretty far back in comparison to her chest armor. I believe that this gives off the illusion that her shoulders are much further back, perhaps accentuating her chest. With all of that in mind, Gali does something awesome. She looks feminine, but doesn't take it to Rudaka levels of ridiculousness. The set isn't trying to prove a point by looking female. It just does. I get the idea designers for construction themes like BIONICLE and Hero Factory shy away from that because generally the target audience is young boys, and these characters might not sell well to them. Unfortunately, that often results in the Toa of Water, or Breeze, looking awfully masculine. There is some marketing logic behind that, but I think that this set sets an example for breaking that chain. Her design is so solid, and she looks so cool, that I don't think her femininity will matter to young boys. They'll want her in their collection regardless. But that's just what I think. As I've said before, all of the Toa are great sets for all of the same reasons I mentioned Tahu is a great set in his review. Gali is easily one of the best out of the group. Top 2 at least, right next to Tahu in my opinion. Definitely worth getting no matter who you are. So that is about it guys, and this is IX Roll at IX, signing off.